What's up, ego hackers? Welcome to the Cutting Edge podcast. I'm your host, C.S. Joseph, and this is episode for December 2021. We have got plenty of episodes within this podcast, and I think we're over 2 years of doing the Cutting Edge podcast. And so, this is kind of a pseudo response video, but kind of not. It's just something that I've been dealing with amongst my coaching clients right now. It's also something that I've just been observing casually in real life. And I've had a lot of time. I've had a lot of time to reflect, basically, on sexuality and kind of some of the nuances that come with it relating to cognitive synchronicity, aka compatibility, or cognitive asynchronicity, aka camaraderie. And this really came as a result of reading a particular book. And this is a book that I would recommend members to read. And that is Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. And I think it's Perel, Mating in Captivity. And I really wasn't able to come to these conclusions because she's providing an aspect of human nature which expresses itself through human nurture, but is not as easily defined in Jungian analytical psychology. We could define it and we could spend time defining it. The problem is that that would potentially take away from the innate practicality of her work and what's actually being said. So as a first point that I would like to make regarding this particular episode, please get yourselves a copy of Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. That is the main source. That is basically what I'm going to be using in terms of this discussion. It is the main source, and I really think everyone, man or woman, needs to be kind of aware of what this INFJ woman has to say about sexuality. She even ends up talking about hypergamy, even though she's not even aware that she's talking about hypergamy. This is just basically a non-red pill source, which ultimately confirms red pill truths. Although I'm not entirely a fan of, like, people think I'm an acolyte or a student of the red pill, and I'm honestly not. I think the red pill is only a small percentage of the answer, and there's so much more to go along with the red pill, because the red pill does not specifically answer some of the issues that Esther Perel is actually talking about when it comes to mating in captivity. What happens to a relationship sexually when you're actually in a relationship? And this really boils down to, some concepts such as needs versus wants. And please, guys, when I say needs versus wants, you really need to pay attention here. Really, really need to pay attention here. So let's put down the foundation a little bit here. So sexuality, where cognitively does sexuality actually come from, like from a cognition point of view? The answer is perception functions. So that's your SENI, your NESI functions. That's ultimately where sexuality comes from. It doesn't come from decision-making functions. It is sourced in your perception functions. Perceiving, so you can perceive things that attract you, or other people can perceive you, that you being attractive to them, is for them to have a sexual encounter with. It's all about perception functions. Perception functions is where sexuality lives, psychologically speaking. So with that being established, Esther Perel in her book starts talking about compatibility and incompatibility in a lot of interesting ways. It's so interesting because she is not aware that she's talking about cognitive synchronicity, and she's not aware that she's talking about cognitive asynchronicity. But based on her observations, she's able to still come to the proper conclusions as a result of someone who would know about synchronicity and asynchronicity to be able to augment or optimize the best possible relationship that they could possibly have. Okay. And that's ultimately what most people who talk about Myers-Briggs type indicator, Jungian analytical psychology, socionics, objective personality system, four sides dynamics, C.S. Joseph, LOL. That's ultimately why people are getting into this niche, into this circle, basically. And a lot of people, like, they don't even realize it. Like, yeah, like there's a bunch of niches. I mean, people use Jungian analytical psychology for personal growth and self-discovery. That's usually the first thing they do. But then they almost always make the jump to sexuality afterwards. I mean, sometimes they do parenting. Sometimes they do business or work-related psychology strategies. But ultimately, it's about self-discovery, personal growth, and sexuality. Those are the main things. And then, like, secondary is business or parenting after the fact in terms of how to best use the psychology for practical application in their life. And a lot of people ask me, it's like, okay, so why do you spend so much time talking about sex? And, like, this is why. It's because that's what people want to talk about. That's what they want to talk about. They want to know how it works. They want to know why it works. They want to know why it's important, etc. So ultimately, like, it is important. And people think I'm crazy when I say that, sexuality is the most important thing in a relationship. Now, oftentimes the people that disagree with me are, well, let's just say obese women that usually disagree with me on that. But the reality of the situation is if a man is not getting his sexual needs met in a relationship, he has every right to cheat on you. In fact, I would encourage him to cheat on you. And I would tell him how to do it and how to do it best, and I would even tell him how to hide it from you if you're a woman who's not meeting your man's sexual needs. And if you're not even giving him enthusiastic sex, I would also recommend he cheat on you too, if you're not giving him enthusiastic sex. Because, sexuality is ultimately a woman's role within a sexual relationship, first and foremost, because sexuality is a woman's only actual real agency. Whereas men, it's a bit different. This is why no one really cares that much about women and their careers and their career life, but they do care about men's career life. But in terms of, like, women, they care about, okay, are they healthy? Do they have body fat? Or are they able to produce children? It's all, do they look good? Are they taking care of themselves? What's their hair look like, etc.? It's really just from a sexual situation. And that's why society treats women like sex objects, and society treats men like success objects, which is ultimately how each of the sexes treat each other. Men naturally treat women like sex objects, and women naturally treat men like success objects. That's why that happens, okay? But the situation is that as much as we could talk about seduction and getting into relationships, there is an aspect or a risk that comes into play when it comes to maintaining relationships. Because the entire seduction process is all about wants. It's all about desire. But the thing is that when you finally have a committed relationship to the point where you're actually, like, considering each other members of your family you choose instead of family you inherit, right? Well, that family you choose ends up actually being more so focused on needs and not necessarily wants. That doesn't mean that the wants are any less important. It's just that it's like all of a sudden a new side of your mind has awoken, and you're able to cognitive transition into that side of your mind more often. It's like when the relationship, like, they have a bunch of, wants, and those wants are being met at the very beginning. And then because wants are being met, then all of a sudden needs become important. They weren't important before, but all of a sudden they are important, especially as a result of an agreement to commitment or an agreement to exclusivity, which I don't recommend men agree to exclusivity at all in their sexual relationships. But if they do, they can do it from a wise perspective. So anyway, like, you have to keep that in mind, these certain limitations, these certain issues as a result. So, but when it comes to, you have the relationship now, you're there, you're established, but it really comes down to meeting each other's needs. And that has to happen. The thing is that each of the 16 types has a different set of needs. They can have similar needs, but it's still different per person. And then the water gets even more muddy when you consider cognitive focus, or where is their area of cognitive development, because we're going to talk about development versus focus a lot. And that's also going to be something that is defined. I think we're going to be talking about development versus focus, actually in the next cutting edge episode next month for January 2022. We're talking about focus versus development and why that is, understanding that distinction is actually really important. But getting back on topic here, if you're not prepared to meet needs, you're going to lose your relationship. And that doesn't mean you don't get to like not focus, or at least provide, not focus, but still take care of wants, like, because the wants ultimately become a foundation, and then the needs end up becoming the roof, basically, of your relationship. You can't have a relationship unless there's a solid foundation. Well, as much as anyone would hate to admit it, wants ultimately become the actual foundation of the relationship, and the roof of the relationship is needs. And the reason why is because eventually it's going to get really stormy out there in life, and there's going to be challenges to your actual relationship. And if you're not able to weather those storms with, like, for example, a roof over your head, etc., a roof over your heads in terms of your relationship is ultimately going to fail. And that's because, of needs. Needs need to be met. And needs get especially harder to meet when you start adding mouths that need to be fed, within your family, like children, etc. That becomes an even bigger issue because you have multiple people's needs needing to be met, and then sometimes wants can be ignored, so the foundation can get ignored, while also the roof is being ignored because you're trying to take care of children, etc. And ultimately, the relationship can fall apart. In Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, she has a chapter called When 3 Threatens 2 that actually explains how and why having a child can actually cause a lot of problems in that area. So keep that in mind. But that's still not the number one threat to relationships, because sexuality is the most core component to a relationship, to a romantic or sexual relationship. Without sexuality, even if you're married, it doesn't matter. Without sexuality, there really is no relationship. This is why if you were actually to file a divorce, the date that you last had sex is actually considered the date of separation. The day after the day you last had sex with your ex-wife or whatever, with whoever you're divorcing, the court actually considers that day to be the date of separation, right? So that it's really fascinating, and that's in California where they make that distinction, where they make that consideration. So with that being said, even the government admits that sexuality is the most important thing in any relationship, and if you deny that, you're out of your mind. You're ignorant and at risk of causing a lot of problems. You're also at risk of increasing the problem of fatherlessness and making the world a worse place. So I suggest you kind of figure that out. But Esther Perel actually goes on within her book a little bit more, and honestly identifies a bigger threat to the relationship, because it directly threatens the quality of sexuality within a sexual relationship itself. And the answer, what is this threat? If you're going to ask me, well, the threat is the following. It is called closeness. Closeness. Closeness is the biggest threat to sexuality in a relationship. Now, if you were to go with me and watch the Disney film Robin Hood, the cartoon with the foxes and whatnot, very cute. The lady in waiting who is with Maid Marian, another lady in waiting, technically. Maid Marian, she gets taught, absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? Absence makes the heart grow fonder. That is basically an old cliche or an old adage that people utilize to actually state that the truth, that closeness is what actually ends up destroying sexuality within a sexual relationship. But why is this relevant? Why is this relevant to, a Jungian analytical psychologist? Why is this like what if I have a golden pair? What if I have a silver pair? What if I have a bronze pair? What if I have a superego enigma relationship, basically? What happens there? What happens if I have a pedagogue? What happens if I have a benefactor relationship, right? So you have all these different kinds of sexual relationships, and there's even more kinds of sexual relationships other than that, right? There's a lot more, but the reality of the situation is those are like the main sexual relationships that we see most people get into. So if they're going all in on compatibility, they're going to do their gold and silver, bronze pairs straight up, and then they're going to follow it up with either a pedagogue or a benefactor relationship straight up. And those are usually the top 5 pairs that most people engage in when it comes to having committed or exclusive sexual relationships, including marriage, basically. With the bronze pair being the most common for marriage, for the most part, for the absolute most common. I'd say the second most common would be pedagogue for marriage. Third most common would probably be benefactor, followed by golden pair, and then silver pair, in that order. It's kind of fascinating how that works. Very fascinating how that works. But there's a lot of reasons for that. And if you're actually going to discuss cognitive synchronicity versus cognitive asynchronicity, compatibility versus camaraderie, basically, if you're going to be discussing those two ends of the spectrum, most people, especially people here within the CSJ community, are so like focused on golden and silver and bronze pairs that they don't even look at the other relationships or even consider their benefits, to the point where it's lame and actually ends up causing a lot more problems. I mean, particularly, and I state this in an upcoming lecture that hasn't released yet, is that I've noticed a pattern. This is me bagging on the NTJ women again, but maybe because the NTJ women are actually more vocal about it. I think the problem is probably just as bad with the NTJ men. They just don't talk about it that much. But NTJs have this problem where they're all about optimization, right? And I know a few NTJs that are my coaching clients and these people absolutely refuse to be in a relationship with someone who is not their golden pair, because from their point of view, they want the best. They want golden pair or nothing, basically. That's what they want. And they really end up closing doors in their life and losing out on opportunities because they're so obsessed with the golden pair. But let's imagine for a second that they actually do get the golden pair. They get their highest highs, lowest lows. They have everything they've ever wanted in a person. But do they have everything they needed in a person? See, that's the issue. So they end up being fantastic lovers. And nowadays within Western society, marriage is nothing more than you just publicly throwing your hands up and saying, okay, we're sexually compatible. I'm quoting Rollo Tomasi when I say that. That was not my original idea. I took that right off of his podcast. And I don't often listen to his podcast. It's just little random clips here and there that I'm inclined to watch on YouTube suggested videos, etc. It's not like I listen to him every day or every episode, because I don't. I probably have maybe watched maybe 0.5% of his content, that's out there and available. But these NTJs, they just get obsessed with the golden pair. They're all about their wants. But, just like NTJs lack SI, like especially INTJs, their SI demon, for example. So these NTJs, they always are all about their wants, and they completely ignore their needs. Much to the detriment of other people. And because of this, you can really look at golden pairs, as basically as a type where it's mostly just lovers or a twin flame, or just, but it doesn't last forever. It really doesn't. People just don't marry their golden pair. Yet these NTJ women are obsessed with their, getting with their golden pairs, etc. People just don't marry them. They just don't. They're down to fuck. They're down to have an amazing, desirous, flaming, romantic relationship with lots of passion. But as soon as as soon as the time for commitment starts coming around, and all of a sudden, everyone's wants are being met here, but when it comes to actually having needs being met, all of a sudden the golden pair becomes impractical, and then they end up breaking up, and the woman loses respect for the man, or the man is not being loving enough to the woman. The bottom line is that needs are just not being met. Therefore, the golden pair ends up getting stuck in the lover category and does not very often actually lead to long-term commitment or marriage. And it's so funny to me to watch these NTJs within the CSJ community going out of their way, absolutely going out of their way, trying to make sure that that they end up, being with, my soulmates, and it's so funny because it's always the NTJs that, especially NTJ men, that actually end up believing in the soulmate myth anyway. And, and even like the FI child of the NTJ women also end up believing in the soulmate myth as well. And whether or not they say it with their words, it doesn't matter. The reality of the situation is because they're so obsessed with their golden pair and that level of obsession that they have, that's ultimately it's ultimately proof positive that they honestly cannot let go of the soulmate myth. Their actions are proving that they can't let go of the soulmate myth, especially since they're so obsessed with the golden pair. But within Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, she actually has a huge warning for her readers when it comes to the golden pair. She warns that the golden pair actually carries with it the tools of the destruction of the relationship. She maintains that the golden pair itself is actually the most likely of the relationships for people to come together, but people to leave just as quickly as they come together, which has definitely been my experience throughout my personal life within my sexual relationships with my golden pair. Every time I have a sexual relationship with an INTJ, it's super hot, it's super fast, super passionate. We're just like all over each other all the time. And then all of a sudden, that's it. It's over. The flame burned out and we've just moved on for some reason. And it's really, really difficult for golden pairs to keep each other in the long run. It's not impossible. It's just difficult. Granted, my wife's grandparents is an ENTP and an INTJ, etc. But still, it takes a lot of effort to keep a golden pair relationship. It really does. But why? Why? Well, guess what, folks? It also takes a lot of effort to keep a silver pair relationship. And it also takes, not as much effort, but a decent amount of effort for a bronze pair. And also the same amount of effort it takes to keep a golden pair, it would also take to maintain a superego enigma pair as well. Why is this? Why is this happening? Did you know it's actually easier to maintain a pedagogue relationship or a benefactor relationship? A lot easier than the other relationships? It's a lot easier. It's insanely easier. It is so much easier to maintain a benefactor relationship and a pedagogue relationship than it is to maintain a gold, silver, or bronze or superego relationship. Absolutely easier. Why? What is it that Esther Perel actually discovered when it came to her studies into sexual relationships and sexuality? What was it? Well, the answer is the threat of closeness. The higher compatibility, the higher synchronicity that you have within your sexual relationship, the higher risk you have of becoming very close to the other person. And closeness itself actually challenges sexuality directly. Sexuality is ultimately a negative thing. If you think about it, it's like a negative force. It can be very violent. It can be very ravishing. It can be very forceful, very sudden, very powerful, very passionate, very desirous, etc. If you want to have the hot monkey sex and you're not getting hot monkey sex in your synchronous, compatible relationship, it's because, as Esther Perel realized and discovered and shared with everybody with her readers, that and has the studies to back it up, read her book, it's because they got too close. compatible sexual relationships get too close. And the golden pair has the highest risk of all of the 16 types of getting too close the quickest. They get way too close the quickest. And because of that, it ends up causing a lot of problems for the relationship. And in my opinion, this is why when I say the highest highs and the lowest lows, while that is what I have observed and experienced with golden pairs in my life and within my coaching practice, I never could actually really say why or articulate it in a way that would make sense to most people. And the reason why with that articulation, I just didn't understand how closeness, the more closeness you have within a sexual relationship, the more apart each of the two people would become when it comes to sexuality. Like, your woman is not going to have any desire to have hot monkey sex with you if she feels really close to you. Because if you're really, really close to you, she's going to start treating you like a brother, or she's going to start treating you like a son. She's not really going to treat you like a lover. A lover is all about intrigue. It's all about the possibility that he might be with somebody else. He might be fucking some other girl on the side. Or he might this, or he might this, or he might not want me anymore. And that is all about fear. There's a fear there, a fear of loss, a fear of we might not be able to be together again next time. And that fear is also known as tension. So I'm going to define sexual tension right now for the audience so that you folks can understand how that works. So that is, quote, the tension between two people who want to do something sexual together, but they end up holding back. And then looking at tension itself. Tension, similar to sexual tension, is when awkwardness is building up between two people or in a situation. And going over to dictionary.com, where we will look up the word tension from there. An act of stretching or straining, which is a negative thing. The state of being stretched or strained, which is a negative thing. Mental or emotional strain, intense, suppressed, suspense, anxiety, or excitement. A strained relationship between individuals, groups, nations, etc. Pressure. This is tension, okay? But it really comes from suspense or anxiety. The closer you are to somebody in a relationship, the more banal it gets, the more boring it is, the more you're able to anticipate all of their behaviors and guess everything that they do, guess their schedule. They're predictable. The more predictable they are, the closer you are. And you can't understand how predictable someone is in a sexual relationship unless you're close to them. This is why a golden pair, for example, and a silver pair, bronze pair, and a superego relationship, those four, which have top four highest compatibility with all of the types on paper, basically, those four relationships, they carry the highest risk of getting closest to each other, which, because it is the closest, there is no suspense, there is no intensity, there is no anxiety because everything is predictable, and because of that, there is no excitement. Therefore, in a sexual relationship, your woman is more likely not to want to orgasm then because you're boring, because there's nothing interesting about you, because of how predictable you are. That's the reality. She gets so close to you that she is able to predict your behavior because she knows you so well. There's no more mystery and suspense and anxiety and excitement. These are the things that are required to keep attraction. These are required to keep a sexual relationship fresh. This is why I maintain that coquetry is the absolute most powerful of the seductive styles. And it is my seductive style. Awesome. Because coquettes can actually create tension on demand, which is absolutely fantastic. So you could think about it this way. The golden pair and the silver pair and the bronze pair and the superego pair are the pairs that have the least anxiety, the least suspense, and thus are the least exciting. They are the least exciting. They're really exciting at the beginning, but over time, they end up getting really boring because you know each other so well and you can read each other so well like a book that it completely just it makes you predictable. It completely destroys all sexual desire within the relationship, and ultimately is probably, and this is an opinion of mine, the number one reason, this is just an opinion, this is a theory, the number one reason why women end up filing for divorce when they are 36 and 37 within the United States of America. 80% of divorces initiated by women because women have just gotten too close to their compatible partner. Okay? With the bronze pair being the most likely marriage of them all. Why? Because oftentimes in this fatherless culture, in this fatherless generation, people want their ego investments enabled. And what pair is more enabling than a bronze pair? There isn't one. Bronze pairs enable people the most. They don't disable them. They are enabled. And I mean enabled in a codependent, unhealthy way. And that's why bronze pairs are the most common marriage. But women just end up getting to know that person, the bronze pair. They're so predictable. There's no tension. There's no suspense because the woman is like, oh, there's no risk of him getting with another man. He'll always be with me. He's super loyal to me, blah, blah, blah. And they're super comfortable and secure. The closer you get, the more secure you end up feeling in the relationship, folks. And the more secure you end up feeling within the relationship, sexual desire goes down. And this is essentially what Esther Perel was talking about within Mating in Captivity. This is a huge, huge risk. And I would like to take the time right now to shit on all of the NTJ women of the CSJ community who are obsessed with getting with their golden pair because they have no idea, but in reality, they are setting themselves up for failure. And that's their own damn fault. Okay? So the reality of the situation is that you have to understand, like, yes, compatible relationships do work and people can make them work. But I guarantee you their quality of sex or their sex life is dog shit. It's dog shit. So, and it's a problem. It's a serious problem. And this problem is only going to get worse over time for each of the couples. And this is why you just don't see that many golden pairs actually together, because they're the ones who can read each other like a book and get to know each other so fast. And they have all of their cards out on the table so fast, mostly because the other person can read their hand and know what cards are in the other person's hand because they know the other person's tells, basically, if they're playing poker, for example. They know each other so well, they already have, and they reach that state of closeness so quickly that they end up not able to maintain the relationship. And folks, let's be honest, this is why I have ultimately broken up with every single INTJ woman in my life, with the exception of one. One, my last INTJ girlfriend, she just got super mega jealous because she didn't want me talking to other girls, especially Railgun, because she knew I was talking to her on the side, and she got super jealous of that. And I didn't care. I'm going to still talk to Railgun anyway. I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want, you know? But she had a problem with it. She got jealous, and she demanded that I have an exclusive sexual relationship with her. And I told her there's no way I'm going to have an exclusive relationship with a woman who is 17 years older than me. That's ridiculous. And that's not going to happen. No, thank you. You know, it's like, sorry, lady, but you're a mistress. You're not a wife. So, you know, and that's just, you know, one of the hard aspects of life that people just have to realize. That's what's going to happen. But, you know, these people in the CHA community are just completely obsessed with finding their golden pair. I just have no choice but to laugh at them because they're literally setting themselves up for failure and they have no idea why. If you want to find out why, well, it's closeness. Closeness is destroying their sexual relationships. Closeness. And Esther Perel explains why in her book, Mating in Captivity. But Esther Perel also provides a solution to the problem. And the solution is sexual tension. And you can introduce sexual tension into a relationship willfully, or that sexual tension can already exist within the relationship naturally. So how do you naturally add sexual tension? Well, the answer to that is you need to look at things this way. Cognitive synchronicity, aka compatibility, is what brings closeness to a relationship. Cognitive asynchronicity, aka camaraderie, is what brings sexual tension to a relationship. Okay? Camaraderie is actually the source of tension, whereas compatibility is a source of closeness. And all these NTJ women are clamoring for closeness, and they think that's what they want. And then all of a sudden, they're the one filing for divorce when they hit development phase and they're 36, 37 years old. And being exactly what Rollo Tomasi predicts them to be. And these women are so solipsistic that they can't even understand that is the ultimate consequence of their decision. I laugh so many times and they tell me, well, you're not a woman, so you don't know women. You don't know how it works. And then I'm like, okay, NTJ girls, why don't you explain to me the last time you seduced an ENTP woman? When was the last time you seduced a woman? Oh, wait, you didn't. Because you don't. You see, so you don't have any experience. This is why women can't teach men about relationships. Right there. They don't even know what they're talking about. Women don't know what they're talking about. So asking a woman about advice about relationships is a real waste of time, men, so don't do it. So, based on that, you got to get to a point. You got to get to a point where you understand what's at risk. The higher compatible relationship you're going to have, the more closeness you're going to have, which is less sexual tension. So while sexuality may be really, really great in the beginning, it's going to end. That awesome sexual height that you have pre-exclusivity, pre-commitment, etc., it's going to be ended. It's going to be fleeting. It's going to be gone. It's going to be gone. Unless you can come up with a way to either manually introduce tension or a way that you make sure that there is natural tension coming within the relationship. And the only way to get natural tension within the relationship is that you have natural camaraderie as a result of cognitive functions. Okay? So, how do you get that natural camaraderie? Well, in comes the pedagogue relationship. The pedagogue relationship is what I personally maintain is the absolute best relationship sexually for any person to be in. Why? One, because they have highest sexual compatibility, can have absolute total sexual closeness with their cognitive functions. All of their sexual functions line up, basically, and it is awesome, which means they always have the highest potential for the best sex in a relationship. But they also have very high decision-making camaraderie, which means they are completely incompatible when it comes to decision-making, which means, like, for example, my pedagogue is an INFJ. The INFJ is all about what they think, and they're not really good listeners. Ergo, I'm not a really good listener either because TE critic. And INFJs have this problem. If I leave them alone for too long, all of the people that are whispering into their ear, they're just going to listen to those people and become part of an echo chamber instead of verify anything and actually go to like the opposite people that are not around them. Because they just, with their TE trickster, just assume everyone thinks that way. No, that's not true at all. They need to actually bother to come to me and ask me what I think so that I could counter what the bullshit crowd is telling them in their ear. Something that a lot of IFJs out there are incapable of doing, and the mature ones have figured that out. So they need to actually go to the other side of the argument and actually research it and ingest all of the other side of the argument, the negative side of the argument, compared to the little positives that those people within their friends group are telling them. This is why, like, if I was in a relationship with an INFJ, the last time I was in a sexual relationship with an INFJ and she had a lot of friends, I'd always ask her what her friends were talking about because I knew there'd be a lot of bullshit that I'd have to debunk every time she went out with her friends. And if I didn't debunk it, she'd just, like, become a fucking problem later every fucking time. It's so annoying. Anyway, at least the sex was... So regardless of that situation, like, you gotta be really aware of, that level of consequence. So the pedagogue relationship, because it has that incompatibility with the decision-making functions, they are wholly incompatible. That is what introduces an aspect of tension. through conflict. The decision-making incompatibility of the pedagogue relationship introduces a lot of conflict, and that conflict creates tension. If you're not having good fights in your relationship, you will not have good sex, and the sexuality of your relationship will die. If you have a relationship where you never fight, that is actually a sign of an unhealthy sexual relationship. You might want to get that fixed. Both people need to learn how to actually be honest with one another, and actually you need to be willing to create conflict within your relationship. This is why women are supposed to be biologically programmed to do so by challenging the masculine whenever they shit test a man. Shit testing is they just behave in an odd way just to test whether or not their man is masculine enough. Because a woman will naturally, through her hypergamous nature, when she's in a committed relationship, will always ask herself, well, could have I done better? So then she'll start acting like a bitch towards her man to see whether or not, he's strong enough to deal with her bitchiness. And if he is, it proves to her, oh yeah, he is masculine. I did make the right choice. And then she moves on from it, whatever. All the while her man gets pissed off that he was shit tested to begin with. But it's that shit testing that creates conflict. It also creates sexual tension. There are times where I'm yelling, veins bulging, cussing out my wife, and ad hominem her until 4 a.m. But then we have a great fuck immediately following. You see, that's why, because it's just building up tension. Having that decision-making incompatibility leads to sexual tension. That tension necessary to have that hot monkey sex, because the fight itself gets so strenuous, so strained, so passionate, so upsetting that the relationship may even end. And that increases desire and increases attraction, for example, right? So if you're not fighting in your sexual relationship, you have a bad relationship. So you're going to have to learn how to introduce sexual tension. So men, it's very easy for you to introduce sexual tension. Let's say you are in a gold, silver, bronze, or a superego relationship. It's very easy to introduce sexual tension. All you have to do is just start giving attention to other women in front of your woman. That's all you have to do, which will eventually lead to fights, which will eventually lead to conflict and tension, and then more sex. Because you're reintroducing suspense into your relationship and anxiety. You're taking away your woman's desire for security. Well, she has her desire for security, but you're taking away her security from within the relationship. And when she feels insecure, that's when the hot monkey sex comes back. Why is that? Here's another example. When a woman, before you marry a woman, for example, she's going to have hot monkey sex with you all the time because she's still technically in the dating phase. It's still technically the sexual marketplace. When she gets married, it's as if she's cashed out of the sexual marketplace and she doesn't have to compete with other women. So men, all you have to do is reintroduce competition within your marriage. Make sure your wife understands that she has to compete with your attention for the attention of other women, even though you're not married to them. Oh, well. I'm very upfront with my wife. I will point out other beautiful women to her in public. I'll even tell her if I'm more attracted to other women I see in public than her. I don't care how bad it makes her feel. Because the reality of the situation is she needs to perform better. And that increases competition. So my wife needs to understand that she has to compete with other women for my attention. Because if she's not, she's being a shitty wife, honestly. So that's not going to work. So men, understand, you have to take the responsibility of reintroducing sexual tension within your relationship if you don't have a natural tension coming from incompatibility, like in a pedagogue relationship, and I'm just using that relationship as an example. You have to find out how to destroy her security, reintroduce anxiety, reintroduce suspense, and if you're a Crusader or a Templar man, stop feeling guilty about it because recognize that's what you have to do anyway. Otherwise, you're going to be unhappy. And when you're unhappy, guess what? She's going to be unhappy. She ain't going to be orgasming at all. She's too close to you anyway. She's just going to divorce your ass and use your money to get her new bolt-ons, her new pair of tits, maybe get her ass done or whatever, and then leave you for some other schlub. Okay? So maybe you should stop feeling guilty and start reintroducing anxiety and suspense within your relationship so you can actually keep the sexual tension up. And you especially have to do this for your golden, silver, bronze, or super ego relationships, especially those 4. You don't have to do it as much for the super ego relationship, but you absolutely have to do it. And you have to do it the most for The golden pair. Hands down, you have to do it the most for the golden pair. Good luck. It's going to be difficult. But you just do it. You just do it. You have no choice. Because if you get in your comfort zone and then your woman gets all super secure in her position within this exclusive or committed relationship, sexual frequency go down, quality of sex goes down. She's going to let her body go. She's not going to take care of herself, not take care of her body, because her beauty is literally your reward, what you as a man get out of the relationship, basically. And she's not going to give it to you anymore. You have to keep your woman in a consistent state of suspense and anxiety so that she understands that literally at any moment she can lose you. And if that's the case, she'll compete and work a lot harder to be in a relationship and be sexual with you. It will lead to enthusiastic sex. This is how enthusiastic sex actually happens. This is how sexual compatibility is augmented by decision-making incompatibility through camaraderie. Okay, this is why I maintain that the pedagogue relationship is the absolute best. You get all of the sexual benefit pluses from highest sexual compatibility like you would a golden pair, but you get all the tension as a result of conflict because of the decision-making functions being just camaraderie. And, and it leads to conflict. But that conflict is absolutely necessary within a sexual relationship. And that's just how it works. If you can't come to that conclusion, I don't know what else to say, because this literally is the truth. This is the truth. There is no better way to say it. You have to be willing to reintroduce suspense. So, anyway, okay. So, I think I've driven that point home. So, that would be the end of Cutting Edge with CSJ.